Good afternoon. Welcome to the next episode of Rock the Closing. We are today talking about maintenance, common charges, assessments, and taxes. These are all really important topics when you're considering the purchase of a home, a condo, or a co-op. Also, just wanted to let you all know we are not tax attorneys, so we will just be providing some clarification regarding the terminology. Stay tuned for another episode where we get really in deep with the tax world when it comes to purchasing and selling your properties, okay? Let's dive right in and ask, what are maintenance and common charges, Orsolya?
Maintenance and common charges are carrying costs of the building. These are determined by the board and it's charged to the tenants or the building owners. What do these include? So a couple of examples: hallway lighting, management fees, elevator updates, any repairs in the building, anything that belongs to the day-to-day operational expenses of the building. This can be doorman, superintendent, cleaning personnel, utilities, building insurance, general maintenance of the building. So basically, that's what's included among some of the things in the maintenance and common charges. Additionally, very often buildings also build a so-called reserve fund, and a portion of the maintenance and the common charge will be allocated to the reserve fund that is later on used for capital improvements or renovations that are required. Okay, but Dalia, what's the difference between the maintenance and the common charges?
A good question, because I do feel like a lot of people think that these are the same thing or that the terms are interchangeable. Not the case. So maintenance is charged by the co-op and it includes building taxes. All right. Common charges are charged in a condominium and they are purely building costs. Okay. So taxes are not included. There's a very key difference between the two of them. And although there might be overlapping sort of like uses for those funds, there's definitely not the same thing at all. Okay, so that's really important to know. Speaking of the taxes that are not included in the common charges, Orsolya, how are the taxes paid when it comes to a condominium?
Right, taxes are paid by the owners. So when it comes to a condominium apartment, on a monthly basis, the owner will be responsible to pay the common charges, which is for the building expenses. And in addition to that, through the Department of Finances of New York City, the owner will be billed a monthly or quarterly taxes. Now, the taxes are defined by the New York City Department of Finances. They are assessing the value of the building, the value of the apartment. They will do some kind of comparison studies. They will look at the market value. They determine the market value of the apartment. And then they will do a very complicated assessed value calculation, which will be a certain percentage of the market value. And based on that percentage of the market value, the New York City Department of Building will allocate a number that will be the actual tax that the owner will have to pay. Usually this is paid on a quarterly basis. Okay, that's about that. Since we talked about condos and taxes, Dalia, why don't you talk about how taxes are paid on houses?
All right, good question. So taxes on houses are paid very similarly to condominiums. So the homeowner is the one that pays the taxes and they pay it directly. There's usually one catch that the buyers should pay attention to, and that is if the property has been renovated or if you as a seller are renovating your property, you should be aware that your taxes can go up, okay? Because these taxes are assessed on a regular basis. And so if you're buying a home which has just added another whole other floor, that's going to affect your taxes, okay? What about tax exemptions, Orsolya? Are there any tax exemptions that we need to talk about?
Yeah, there are plenty. So I'm just really going to mention a very few ones that are perhaps the most common ones. So we talk about tax exemptions and tax abatements, which are not the same. And these both be applied to different types of ownerships, co-ops, condominiums, and houses. Exemptions are usually that is given to you as a person, to the individual, based on some kind of qualification. For example, tax exemptions would be, it's called a STAR, school tax relief would be one exemption. There is exemption related to a veteran status. There is an exemption related to religious exemptions. This would be a couple of good examples. But then there are abatements. Abatements are given by the city in order to encourage developers to create new homes and new buildings. And if they do so, the developer may enter into an agreement with the city that certain number of units will be rent stabilized, allocated for lower income families. And in that case, the city is giving to the entire building tax abatements. This could be the J51 or the 421A tax abatement. These have many different technical names as they are referred to. What you need to know about these is that they are running out over time. So usually are given for like 10, 15, 20 years. And as we get closer to the end year, the tax abatements are going to be lower and lower. So in year 15, when you pay 90% of your taxes because there is only a 10% abatement remaining, this may impact the sales price if you wish to sell your home, your apartment. The next question is, how about with houses?
Okay, how are the taxes paid on houses? We kind of set this up at closing, okay? So when you first purchase a house, you're going to be filling out a New York State tax form, and that's going to be letting the state know that property ownership is being transferred from the seller to the purchaser, so that starting right away, the property tax bill is issued to the new owner. Okay, these are usually issued quarterly, and a lot of people opt to have them rolled into their mortgage payment. And that's something that we usually set up at closing. So you let your mortgage bank know, as a purchaser, I'd like you to hold escrow and go ahead and collect my tax bill for me and then pay it. So when you send me the bill for my mortgage, my taxes are included in there and it's sort of like prorated every month. So a lot of people do opt for that. Some people do not. They want to get their tax bill quarterly and they pay it directly. And that's fine too. Those are the two ways sort of that you can pay the taxes on the house. And if you opt to do it one way or another at closing, you can certainly change your mind later and, have the mortgage bank stop collecting escrow and charging you, or vice versa. You can ask the mortgage bank to start doing it for you if you had originally opted to pay it directly. Okay. Orsolya, I heard you talking about abatements, exemptions, assessments, lots of interesting stuff. So what are assessments?
So assessments are additional costs that the property owner or the tenant shareholder has to pay to the building for one or another reason. Usually these assessments are, again, decided by co-op and the condo board. And they can define assessments in several different ways, but here is one. They may define an assessment which will be calculated on a proportional allocation way. So it will mean that regular assessments are going to be allocated based on the percentage of ownership to each unit of the building. And this percentage is usually determined by the size of the unit or the value relative to other units. Or there could be like equal allocations whereby the board decides that the special assessment is the equal amount independent how big of a unit you are occupying in the building. What are these assessments for? These are for costs that are not included in the regular maintenance and common charges, for costs that are excessive, that cannot be covered through the monthly maintenance and the monthly common charges. Let's think about there was a flood in the building. and the hallway gotten flooded through the roof for one or another reason. This was not foreseen when the co-op was planning its next year budget, so there has to be an assessment collected unless the insurance is paying for it. Or, for example, the Department of Building comes out, looks at the building and says, you need this and this fixed on the facade, on the surface of the building, or you are in violation of this and this regulation. And then additional penalties must be paid by the building. Again, anything that wasn't planned through the annual budget and for what there is no allocated money in the reserve funds will be a special assessment that will be on the building, and it's imposed by the board because the building owners, shareholders will have to come up with that amount. Okay, Dalia, is there an assessment for a house? Have you heard about that?
No, unfortunately, there is not. Everything that needs to be done in a house is going to come out of the owner's own pocket. So that is the burden of being, a homeowner, as much as it is a pleasure and a dream. We definitely have to be careful about that because it's important that we do our due diligence and find out the condition of the home, because like you were saying, if there's some unforeseen expense, this is something that's coming out of one person's pocket, the owner, and it's not going to be a cost that is collected and split among tenants and shareholders, which, that could be a big cost. It could be a little one. It could be over months. But when it comes to a house, something goes wrong, unexpected expense, your boiler stops working, pipe in the wall bursts, that's completely on the owner. So there are no assessments, nobody to look to collect and sort of pay that as it comes at you. So that's a big key difference there when it comes to assessment. All right. I think we've covered everything, at least for this episode here, for maintenance, common charges, and taxes. Of course, we'll get deeper into it a little bit later with the taxes. And so thank you for joining us on this episode of Rock the Closing. Hope you learned a little something and hope you tune in next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to Rock the Closing. This podcast is hosted by real estate attorneys who offer valuable insights. Please remember that the content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Always consult a qualified professional before making any decisions. This podcast is copyrighted by Rock the Closing, and any reproduction, syndication, or rebroadcasting of the content requires written permission.